Gentlemen, what is good? Tonight's video is going to be called Mourning the Death of Your Perception. This is something I came up with when I was in seminary. It was several years after my father had died. My father died in like 2005-ish, and I went to seminary in about 2007. And I started, people at seminary uh, were experiencing the loss of parents, and they would come up to me and they would ask me questions and this and that about how I dealt with it, and that's how I came up with this. But real quick before we dive into that, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, also hit the like button. It would help me out tremendously. I'm trying to get some people to actually watch some of my videos. I know the content is going to be relatively dry for now until I can figure out how to like do some video editing. Right now I'm doing some uh, basically changing my career. I'm about to go into selling life insurance, and I've been spending a tremendous amount of time focused on that. And I will get back to doing this as a side hustle at some point, and trying to figure out how to provide you guys with content that's something you guys actually really could benefit from. So, but yeah, mourning the death of your perception was a concept I came up with while I was in seminary, where people would ask me, and particular couple people, a few people that I knew that had lost parents, and they said, how'd you deal with it? And I said, well, listen, like basically, my dad had died, but realistically, from my standpoint, and I took this from a deeply philosophical standpoint because I was studying philosophy and all that stuff during seminary, was, you know, it wasn't so much as my dad that died, which he did. The physical body of my father was gone, but what I was left with as a person here on earth was my perception of my father. And I had to change that perception. It was now, instead of being able to, my father to be somebody that I could talk to or ask questions to, he became a person that basically I had to now remember. And I had to go back and to listen to the life lessons that I learned from my father. So my perception of my father had to change. And that's where this whole death of perception came from. And that has morphed into so many other things for me personally. Being a part of the red pill lifestyle, I think that plays into factor as to you have to learn how to mourn the death of your perceptions, because your perceptions are going to change. And if you don't, I guess you're gonna revert back into old ways, or you're just gonna want to reject certain new ways. Or a lot of these guys, I don't know if it's the black pill community or whatever, after they experience the red pill, they don't know how to mourn the death of their perceptions. It's like, just be done with it. Like, you can have your time, be like, damn dude, that really sucked. Everything I learned in life was counterproductive to where I want to go now. Now I gotta get over it. And I hate to use the word get over it, but it's true. You gotta mourn the death of that perception. That perception was no longer useful to you. It was no longer vital to your existence moving forward. So, I just wanted to touch base on that today about what it means to mourn the death of your perception. And the first thing is, you have to understand that as a man, particularly as a Western man, that you were basically given a perspective of life that isn't true. You were kind of lied to in a lot of ways. You were lied to not only through television, but through your church. And I'll explain a little bit more what that means through the church. And I think there's churches out there that have good doctrine, not so good doctrine. And I'll explain to you the difference here real quick. But your school system has lied to you. And I know this because I worked in the school systems, and right now they are basically, as a man, you're being told to be that you're being taught to be you're being treated as a dysfunctional girl. Okay, and this all plays into gynocentrism, gynocentric social order. The world basically is treating you, and this happens in church, this happens on television, this happens in schools. These are the main areas where you have been raised, and it's getting more and more complex for the younger and younger kids because it's everywhere. So in the church, I didn't realize this until I went to seminary, where just how deeply penetrated the church has been through gynocentrism. It happens in the seminaries, and it's been happening in the seminaries for a long time. It's been happening for, I would imagine, at least through the 60s and 70s, since the 1960s and 70s, where what they're doing is they're basically getting rid of what I would consider honest liberal thought. And liberalism, I know if you're a tradcon or if you're a conservative, you think, oh, well, liberalism sucks. Well, liberalism had its day where it was good. Its only weakness was that it allowed the feminine imperative to come in, amongst other things. And same thing in tradcon communities. But and there's a lot of things underneath what I'm saying that I need to flush out that I'm not just going to be able to. But I wanted to produce this video tonight anyway. I felt really good about my progress. I spent a whole bunch of hours today trying to get ready for my career and passing this test, and I did great. And I was like, I'm going to reward myself by making this video. But okay, so the church has, in essence, fallen to this, and you'll see this. The leaders today in churches are feminists, and they are feminized, and they are agents of gynocentrism. And you'll know this. I mean, I had a conversation with my uncle, and this was a conversation I had recently with him when I was in North Carolina recently, and he couldn't figure out why his church, it was the Alliance Church, now allows women to become ordained. And it's like, well, that's the norm. And I said, well, now be prepared in the next years coming that it's going to be homosexual ordination. It's going to be this and that. It's going to be equalism. It's going to be blank slate equalism. It's going to be something far more. And that's the starting point. And it's like, well, most average person today who is going to watch what I'm saying and my video is going to be like, dude, you're a misogynist. You're this, you're that. And it stems out of blank slate equalism. And there are certain roles, especially within the church, and the Bible is very clear, women are not to be leaders. And I don't know why it said that. I mean, if you believe that the word of God comes from God, you'll understand that God understood men and women in their positions, right? And that's one way of looking at it. From a dry, sort of more liberal standpoint on looking at it, it's like, I think that they had a good sense of understanding male and female roles and what men were good at and what women were good at. And today, and now it's like, everyone thinks that women should just be able to do what men do, and men should be able to do what women do. And that's just not a good position to come from today at all. We're finding that it's failing our society tremendously. So in the church, you'll see this blank slate equalism, and it's happening everywhere. And it's basically going into everywhere except for Catholic Church. And the Catholic Church has its problems, right, with all the pedophilia, but they're not allowing female ordination. Same thing in the Orthodoxy Church. And really interesting point on the Orthodoxy Church, the Russian Orthodoxy Church, right? And I'm not talking about Vladimir Putin. I'm not talking about Russia, this and that. But the Russian Orthodoxy Church is one of the largest growing churches in the non-Pentecostal area of Christianity in the entire world. And it's growing in areas like Russia, where Russia has now become a capitalist culture. And it's growing astronomically, particularly in areas where there are more white Christians than any other majority or any other color of person. And I'm not trying to advocate for nationalism or white nationalism, anything like that. I'm just trying to provide facts. And you'll see Orthodoxy growing in areas like Russia, and Catholicism and Orthodoxy are basically the only two last standing places where you're not allowed to ordain women. And that is something that your average person in Western civilization will overlook. Okay. So I'm not going to be able to give you an adequate answer to this problem, but so the world has given us lies, and I'm trying to sort of whet your appetite a little bit. TV cable has been propaganda for a long time. We know that. We know that it has been forever, going way back into the 60s, maybe even before, where they realized that selling to women was more profitable by telling them the Sex and the City lies. Hold on, let me show you this. This is a book I've been getting into lately, by Sue Ellen Browder. Actually, this was mentioned in the Kevin Samuels podcast a couple months ago, and I decided to go through this book. She talks about subverted. I mean, that's a term straight out of like the communist agenda to basically infiltrate people's minds and to enslave people mentally. Is how the book is titled "Subverted: How I Helped the Sexual Revolution Hijack the Women's Movement," and how she basically got women to believe this whole Sex in the City lie about how promiscuity and casual sex is okay, and that ended up hurting. And that's something that most people would rather die believing that lie, because in order for them to believe that, that would mean they'd have to understand that their entire life was a lie. And that's true. It's what happened, right? It's like society tells women today that you can have casual sex with no consequences. Well, we know there's all types of problems. We know that women today who engage in casual sex end up having more long-term problems as far as pair bonding, and statistically they become less likely to have marriages and this and that. And I've touched base on a number of other videos, and I think the reasons for that is because they become, when they start hitting their 30s and they want to be married, they can't find a guy who can sexually please them. And because of the 80-20 rule today, where 20% of men are having all the sex, 80% of the men are not really, the lower bottom guys are not prepared to deal with those women, and so those women end up being unhappy. And those women experience lots of oxytocin hits early on in their life, and they can't get those when they're married with children later on, and it becomes something that's very unsatisfying to them. So, I mean, that's just the way it is, unless you can find yourself a man who knows how to do that, who you find sexually stimulating, which they're just not. There's just not, those men are out there anymore. So, but anyway, schooling systems as well. School systems nowadays basically treat young boys as defected girls. They treat hyperactive attention disorders, is what they call them, ADHD, as problematic. They medicate young boys. It's like boys are supposed to sit down, be cooperative, and I've seen this firsthand. They're supposed to be young, sit down, be cooperative, do exactly, and learn the way that girls are supposed to learn, and that happens in school systems today. So, and I'm not going to be able to flush this out as much as I like, but I'm kind of giving you like these main points and giving you what I've seen, so that, if you had any questions, hit me up on Twitter. I'd be, more than glad to kind of get more into it. But yeah, at this point, I would just love to be able to spark a conversation with people, anyone willing to listen at this point, really. So the other thing is, my second point here is that the reason why you need to mourn the death of your perception is because your parents have been lied to. Okay, whether you had a parent, two-parent household, or one-parent household, or whatever, no-parent household, where you're in foster care or something like that, they've been lied to, and they really don't have any clue. Like, if my father-in-law had any idea what he was doing sending his daughter to college, he would never have done it. He had no idea that you were sending your kids to college, especially your daughters, so that they could start racking up their notch counts. You had no idea, right? You had no idea that college was just basically a place where, it was basically a complete debauchery, it was like a heathenistic party. That's what colleges are. I mean, and believe me, I've been there, and I've done it myself, and I went to college. I had fun. But for guys and girls, there's different consequences to their action. Guys can be okay with sleeping with multiple people. Women, they cannot. So college becomes a problem for a lot of women. They focus, and you'll see this today with young women. It's like, well, what's your priority? Well, your top sexual market value is when you're 23, right? For men, it could be when you're like older, 30s, 40s, as long as you keep yourself in good shape. So women have a very small window of opportunity to land what's most precious to them. Well, even women who prioritize their careers early on in life and have kids, they'll tell you that their kids are the most important thing. So nobody's telling women today, well, then maybe you should prioritize pair bonding relationships as opposed to casual sex. Nobody's telling women today that they should prioritize finding a family. They're telling women to prioritize career. And then by the time they start to prioritize the family thing, it's like they're in their late 20s and they've lost out on so many options. And not only that, they've had sex with numerous men where it's going to be hard for them to find a guy who basically can please them sexually in bed for a pair bonding lifelong experience. And it's a really sad thing. And it happens, right? And I understand this. And there are men out there and there are people out there that do understand this. Women are waking up to this. And this is a reality of the world that we live in. So your parents had no idea what world you're living in. They had no idea. My father would have had no idea. And boomers who sent their kids to college had no idea. And so the millennials now who went through the party years, they think, well, the guys are supposed to be traditional and the women are just supposed to get this and that. Well, that's not the case. It's like, no, ladies, you don't get to have a traditional guy when you did not act traditional yourself. You're nothing like your mom. You're nothing like your grandmother. You didn't sleep with only 2-3 guys, maybe one, depending on some circumstances. You slept with a lot of guys, and that changed the reality of your world. And men like your fathers. If you're a woman in her 30s and your father had a good career, guess what? Men today are competing with a whole different market. Okay, they're competing with you, ladies. I mean, if a lady ever watches this, but women today are occupying the vast majority of the workforce. And so men are it's becoming harder and harder for men to become, it's becoming harder for men to become, monetarily attractive because you're out earning men straight up, regardless of what society's telling you. And that 70 cents per the dollar thing, it's just, that stuff just isn't true. I mean, you're earning as much as these men, and so these men can't keep up. They can't keep up with you financially. They can't keep up with you sexually, and it's going to end up rendering you guys alone. And I think there was a study from like Merrill Lynch or one of these big companies where they said by 2030, I think it's the majority of women, close to 50-60% of women are going to be alone. And I think that's going to be one of the major reasons why, is because you can't find a man who's as sexually experienced as you, and you can't find a man who can financially keep up with you. And that is basically a disaster for you, ladies. Okay. The third point is your quest for truth is going to be an independent journey, okay? Separate from everything you were ever raised, as far as religion, as far as your understanding from women, as far as your understanding from masculinity, as far as your understanding from money and fitness. Let me touch on that last point, fitness. I was in North Carolina. I went to my youngest cousin's high school graduation party. One of the advice I gave to him in front of these other men was, I said, listen, man, you need to keep yourself physically looking good. And right off the bat, 2 other men were like, no, you don't have to worry about that. You don't got to worry about that. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. And I said, dude, you need to worry about that. You will be, as a man today, as long as you're just not overweight and fat, you keep yourself looking good, you will separate yourself from the vast majority of men, and you will be getting looks your way and it's so easy. I mean, I'm talking go to the gym 4 or 5 times a week, just lift, keep yourself in good shape, above average shape. And this is something that you need to put into your regimen, and it will be something that you realize that most men today are being lied to. They're told, well, no, you don't have to look good. Someone should love you for who you are. And that's just not how women are programmed. And I'm not saying women are shallow. I'm just saying women are more selective in the sexual mating strategies, and they're going for the higher men. And we know that in the 80-20 principles, right? The 80-20 rule, whatever it is. I mean, we see that on dating sites like Tinder. It's like women only swipe right to men that are hot. They don't swipe right to men that are to the 80% that are not. Keep yourself in that 20% physically. It's going to be very important, okay? Understand women Understand female hypergamy, read The Rational Male, volumes 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and I'll leave it with that real quick. Understand masculinity, also read The Rational Male, volumes 1, 2, 3, and 4. Understand The Unplug Alpha by, let me see here. Let me show you. Right here is a good starting point. You can go with Richard Cooper's book, The Unplugged Alpha, The No Bullshit Guide to Winning with Women in Life. This guy gets criticized left and right amongst people in the real world. Be prepared for that. It's going to be, it's exactly what he says, The No Bullshit Guide to Winning with Women in Life. Also read The Rational Male by Rollo Tomasi. Start there. That's volume 1. I've read volumes 1 and 4. And I can tell you that they have drastically helped and shaped my life. Watching their YouTube channels is going to be really important, but you're going to have to make a quest for your own truth. You're going to have to go out on a journey to find your own truth. And it's going to be your own personal quest. And you're not going to be able to talk to women about it. You're not going to be able to really talk to your parents about it. You can find online communities with men that are doing it. At some point, I actually want to join an online community where I feel like I can talk to this, because I don't come across men in my every day in and day out life that are discussing these things or understanding the importance of these things like I understand. So understanding religion too. I mean, religion just from a individual understanding standpoint, right? It's like I went to seminary, and one of the things I learned that there was a major schism between the church and between church. I was like, what does that even mean? It's like, so they're teaching people at seminary all these, the pastors, something that the pastors aren't teaching anybody, the parishioners at church. And it's almost as if like the pastors are scared to talk to their parishioners in a way that the seminary professors were able to talk to them. And they're scared of telling them these hard things, that the interpretations are far more complex than you think it is. So, and the seminaries are changing, man. They're becoming more feminized, and they're becoming more emotional driven, and becoming agents more and more of gynocentrism. So you're going to have to be also very cautious of that. If you want to go to a seminary nowadays, I don't know where you go. Personally, I went to Pittsburgh Theological Seminary 10 years ago, and it was a good place, but it was expiring at that point. The mix of conservatism with liberalism was blending. And more importantly, the feminization was coming in more and more. And once that happens, I think we're going to have major problems, which I think we do have major problems. But anyway, that's it. This video is just sort of me kind of coming out here and just kind of talking to you about mourning the depth of your perception. You're going to have to engage in things that are going to be uncomfortable, going to be a little more complex, and just kind of understand that the world has been lying to you, understand that your parents don't even understand what's going on, and also understand that you're going to have to develop your own independent interpretation on how things work in the world, and that's going to require work for you, okay? That's going to require you getting physically in shape. It's going to require you reading, doing your own, investigation, research, And research also includes, and I want to end with this, research definitely includes going on YouTube, okay? And looking up ideas that men have within particular circles, like the red pill community. I mean, I don't watch a whole lot of black pill content, but I've heard that they have some of their own ideas, this and that. I've gotten a lot of benefit from reading the Rollo Tomasi guys, the Richard Cooper guys, even Kevin Samuels, which is blown up. I think he's about almost close to a million subscribers. He talks about Sue Ellen Browder, and when he did, I ordered this book, read through it, an amazing book. And I don't expect, even now, like with the knowledge I have in this book, I would never go upstairs and talk to it with my wife, because she would just be like, what? You just have to understand this. And even in your own marriage, understand that you're, the mourning the death of your perception is going to be something that you, your God, whether you have one or not, I do, you, your God, and your ideas are going to have to deal with internally. It's not going to be something that you're going to really be able to kind of discuss with other people unless you find, people like myself who want to talk to you about it and this and that. So, all right, that's it. We're up to 25 minutes, 20 seconds. I appreciate you watching. If you do watch, once again, hit the like button, do subscribe, and with the vested interest in knowing that I'm going to be getting better at these things and coming up with better content in the future. Promise you guys that. All right, peace.